Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation. Before we begin the presentation, I wanted to take a moment to go over a few housekeeping issues. If at any point during today's presentation you have a question for any of us here, for our speakers, our panelists, or any of our hosts, please feel free to direct them via the chat window and or Q&A window, and we'll do our best to answer all of your questions as time permits. We will be recording this presentation, so make sure that you keep an eye out in your inboxes for a follow-up email with a link to the recording and or a copy of the slides as well. So without much ado, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. So we wanted to thank you for joining us on behalf of Centrinet and Liquidware Labs for joining us today. Today we are joined by Dario Ferreira and Kevin Cooke from Centrinet and Liquidware Labs respectively, and they're going to go ahead and take us and walk us through today's presentation. So without much ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass the presentation off to Kevin.
Thank you so much, Ray, and welcome everybody for joining us today. So today we're going to talk about user experience monitoring and specifically how user experience needs to become more prevalent and really the core or foundational approach to monitoring next generation desktop environments as it relates to the transformation itself, but also in terms of how you realize near and longer term success in terms of those infrastructures and architectures. Gartner not too long ago released a paper or an article that highlighted, based on significant research looking at asking CIOs and looking at success factors as it relates to next generation infrastructures, specifically VDI in this case, and noted that user experience is the most critical and the most variable or challenging to get right as it relates to meeting end user expectations and ultimately delivering a next generation desktop, inclusive of meeting all of the performance and key business as well as user expectation levels throughout that process. Now, taking a step back, from a traditional desktop standpoint, we know that it's relatively straightforward to deliver and ultimately manage user experience. You've got one person, one device, and the user experience may be good, it may be bad, but it's a relatively straightforward process to address that. You swap out the device, you optimize the operating system, and you can manage the expectations and ultimately deliver that user experience in a traditional PC or single device environment. When we move to next generation desktops and next generation workspaces that are virtualized, we've now got many users, and those many users are sharing the same infrastructure. In many cases, that infrastructure or components of that infrastructure may even be shared with other enterprise class workloads. And so user experience becomes a lot more difficult, not only to quantify, but more difficult to manage overall as these infrastructures become more complex and more shared. So defining that user experience and ultimately identifying how and what the opportunity is to manage the user experience is really a critical success factor overall in meeting those goals, again, from a business perspective, but also from a user's perspective. Certainly making the transformation can be straightforward. You can go through a tactical exercise of taking all of your PCs, virtualizing those users, and moving them to a virtual infrastructure. But if you're not also meeting the somewhat soft or nebulous and sometimes vague metric of meeting the end user expectation, you ultimately will end up with dissatisfied users and ultimately a failure in your project. I want to take another step back here and talk briefly about monitoring versus user experience monitoring. So transitioning here, some of you may have heard the term yet another monitoring platform or yet another monitoring solution. And so in many regards, that term has become almost a bit of a bad word. I want to highlight the fact that all monitoring platforms are not the same, and it is really important for you to identify and take, in this case, a more user-centric approach if the workloads that you're monitoring are in fact going to be ones tied to individuals, tied to virtual workspaces or tied to some type of next-generation desktop approach. By way of just a couple of brief examples here, the term monitoring as it relates to the space that we're talking about here, next-generation desktops, traditionally would fall into two buckets. Those that are predominantly infrastructure monitoring platforms, ones that are looking at the hardware, the storage, the servers, the network, the infrastructure broadly first, and then diving in or drilling down to the individual workspaces, the individual VMs. We also see, and you'll also recognize that there are more application performance monitoring or APM-centric tools, which look at a higher level and try to manage the delivery of an application, tying things like transactional time or individual latency times for various components, and using an end-to-end measurement as a way to talk about the monitoring of the environment. I'm talking specifically about user-centric, and we'll dive into that a bit more. But I want to highlight some key things that you need to be aware of if you're looking at these more traditional infrastructure or application-centric tools. First and foremost, when you're looking at from a top level down or an outside-in view of that user experience, you run the risk of leaving yourself open and running into a scenario where you get a false sense of security. Just because the servers look okay, just because the storage looks okay and the networking looks okay and nothing is being triggered from a monitoring standpoint does not necessarily mean that your users are gaining a great user experience. And so don't lose sight of the fact that if you're not measuring the user experience directly in some way, shape, or form, you run the risk of creating a false sense of security or a safety net, which in fact is not truly benefiting the organization as it relates to quantifying, measuring, or setting up user experience as a key performance indicator. Similarly, if you're not looking at all of your users all of the time, you have what I would call the finding a needle in a haystack issue, where if you don't have visibility to a specific user or a specific application that a group of users are using when a problem exists and you can't go back in time and trend that information and look at when the user experience met an inflection point or changed, you're going to have a blind spot with respect to the universe, the groups, or your user population overall. It's really important when you're looking at user experience monitoring to be able to trend, identify, and look at individual users and groups of users from an inside-out perspective, meaning from the actual virtual machine or the workspace or the next-generation desktop that those users are looking at, and then trend and track the infrastructure and the supporting components second, not the other way around. Similarly, as we know, most environments are going to be heterogeneous or hybrid. You may have a VMware-centric infrastructure or a Citrix infrastructure or even a Microsoft-centric infrastructure or a little of all of the above. And in the middle tier here, you'll see that you may have different products or different technologies that are monitoring those platforms or monitoring those infrastructures. But what's providing you the end-to-end heterogeneous look at the user experience? Regardless of the device that user may be using, regardless of the platform, the application, or ultimately the modality in which that workspace is delivered, you need to be able to look at that from an agnostic and hybrid point of view. So let's talk just briefly about a couple of key things that are important as we consider next generation or user experience monitoring. The first being looking at user experience specifically from an inside-out perspective provides you with an opportunity to not just mitigate risk, but ultimately define, baseline, and set up key performance indicators or service level agreements that are tied to the user experience itself. You're not doing that sort of in a secondary manner based on measuring, supporting, or tangential elements. You're measuring and you're looking specifically at the user experience, trending that information, and then defining success based on that trendable information. Related, if you're not looking at things in this way, it becomes very, very difficult to get to the heart of the matter quickly. Again, it's relatively easy with any monitoring tool to identify when you see a spike in storage or when you see a spike in a host or whether you see latencies due to maybe a DNS or an Active Directory infrastructure that's not optimally performing. But are you truly looking at this infrastructure in a way that allows you to get down to the root cause? For those of you who have stubbed your toes or been involved in complex troubleshooting exercises with VDI, you know that just because you have a spike in IOPS for your storage platform doesn't necessarily mean that storage is the contributing problem. Maybe your users were put in the wrong tier. Maybe your users don't have enough virtual RAM and they're constantly paging to disk. That's going to look like, from a monitoring perspective, that your storage is at fault. The reality is it's an architectural or a provisioning error, and you need to, at that point, provide more RAM in this instance or in this exercise for that user and not buy SSD drives. Similarly, by quantifying the user experience, you provide yourself with an opportunity to baseline that user experience and have a before and after picture. Maybe you're looking at it in an assessment type of situation where you're baselining normal or defining what that user is experiencing on their own traditional desktop, and you now use that as a performance or a KPI to define success during the initial transformation. We're going to define success not based on the fact that the help desk phone isn't ringing, but based on the fact that we've made the physical transformation to a virtual workload and we're delivering an equal or better user experience on the next generation infrastructure. These are some of the things that are really important and critical for you to look at when you're considering a user experience monitoring solution and looking to specifically transform your desktop workloads in some way. I'm going to turn things over here to Dario to talk a little bit about Centrinet and how they're delivering and some of the things that they've seen in this space. Dario? Dario, you may be on mute there locally. We don't hear anything from you.
I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Ray, and thank you for those that are attending today. Again, my name is Dario Ferreira, and my primary responsibility here at Centrinet is to oversee and ensure that the value that we deliver to our customers is of exceptional satisfaction. So let me change slide here a little bit. So let me start off with telling you a little bit about Centrinet's history and the organization. Centrinet is what I'm pretty proud of, and of being a Liquidware partner and a Center of Excellence partner. We were founded as an organization during the technology nightmare of early 2000, and our basic focus was truly on delivering projects around virtual platforms to our clients. So that was going on site, doing your typical base installs of what we know of Citrix, Microsoft, and VR technologies at that point in time. We did, early on, I would say about the first year, we started immediately serving the typical ASP delivery model, which was serving an application nationwide to some of our customers in the healthcare space. Today, we have grown and kind of evolved to not only from the normal technology shifts that we assume through fruition of technologies and what's taking place, but also by our clients and their needs and their requests. So today, Centrinet provides global delivery of the typical project installs. We do full on-site managed services, as well as the full complete cloud delivery model, which customers run data from our data centers. So our business model is simple. We try to provide and we focus on value of the experience. And this is not only specifically to our clients, but more importantly from the core internally at Centrinet. And by doing so is having a great set of engineering team that carries and have the same belief to deliver to our customers. So as we move forward here, I'm going to share with you and to further extent on some of the points that Kevin touched on, and I want to talk about some real-world lessons learned around the user experience through the early days versus where we are at today and what we've learned through the course of the evolution of technology within the VDI space. Everybody's heard and has thrown away the many different ways that user experience and what it means. I mean, you just heard Kevin simply state how it has a direct integration or a direct relation into service levels agreements, and this is what's important to our customers. What I treat user experiences and the way I translate it internally and what we perceive to our clients is what is the user perception? What is the water cooler talk that if you go into any organization, what are users saying to each other about the newest technologies, what's IT delivering, and how is it meeting their needs? So we have developed 3 different levels of what we believe defining the true user experience, what it means, and the steps we take. The first level is what we perceive to be as discovery. As engineers and being in technology, we always feel that we know and we have a clear understanding of what the user needs versus what they actually use. The simple fact is that as we started going through building out POCs, pilots, and so forth in the early days of EDI, there was a major gap that existed. That major gap was quickly realized that we really don't have an understanding of what's in the physical world. How do we take what they're doing in the physical life of PCs and how do we bring it into the virtual world with VDI? And one of the things that was evident is that we didn't understand what CPU consumption they use, what applications, how often they used applications, really what brought that uniqueness about their love of physical PCs into the virtual world. And that all translates to the initial stages of having a true user experience. And what we did is we really made it very simple. We took their user profile, we built a profile on those users, and we tried to get it as close as possible to the virtual world. That means even simply just putting a desktop background that matches the physical world, that was important to the user. The second level of what I perceive to be that user experiences is the consistencies, okay? And this is what I would consider the honeymoon stages for the users. Now that we have all the users running in VDI, we've worked night and day to ensure that the users have that experience. We validate that the system is running, that it's responsive, and we try to mitigate the number of problems that users are kind of complaining about. What we try to do, unfortunately, with these environments, it's not one of those environments that we can just leave and forget. Unfortunately, today's technology, it's very simple. It doesn't apply to it at all. So basically, the ongoing visibility and the monitoring of those environments, the resources they're using, how often the users are connecting, how often, what kind of infrastructure, what's my infrastructure doing at that point in time, is very, very critical. And this is what I consider and deem the knowing and the consistency stages of ensuring that the users are getting the same experience today, and that could be 3, 4, 5, 6 months from the time were brought onto the platform to what it is today. And this is what I would consider that even though we try in IT, it's very hard to have that proactive adoption in IT because we tend to be very reactive. It is critical for the success of these users and ensuring that user experience. So the primary goal here is this, is that ensuring that through the monitoring stages of and the visibility of what those users are doing in a real-time state, and also looking back at a historical state, that we're still providing the same or equal level of service that we did or we cared about when we first brought them on to VDI. Unfortunately, things change, and users change, applications change, application requirements change, business change. So in order to continue to be effective with that monitoring is to ensure that we're ready for what tomorrow has to offer, matching today and ensuring that we can scale to meet for tomorrow's needs. And the third point here is kind of goes in line to what Kevin mentioned, and that would be the root cause analysis. That's what I would consider the addressing or the mitigation as problems come up. You know, as effective and as much due diligence we try to do as it pertains to building these environments out to the most effective state with stability and scalability, problems do occur. We can't avoid them, right? So these type of tools, the tools that we need to have in our back pocket are tools that can help us dig deep into what we're delivering to our users and being able to identify where the problems may lie. It could be logon delays. It can be application response. query times within an application, how it connects to another back-end component that makes up that client for that virtual desktop world or for that application delivery model. These are all things that it is critical and important in trying to address within hours and not days and months. And this is what I perceive and what we perceive to be as the equating value of user experience to the SLAs of what businesses need from us. Okay. Moving on here next is what I perceive to be, as we talk about the implementation challenges, right? So today's technology, we're very conformed in what is private cloud today. Public cloud is making a penetration into a lot of businesses. Being in that space of offering both the private cloud for internally as well as what we provide cloud to the public cloud to our customers, we are seeing more and more of that hybrid solutions that customers are looking for. And those hybrid solutions, as well as unknowingly the platforms and the technologies and the data centers that are different, it is important to have a tool set that is able to tell us at any point in time where the latencies lie, going down from private to public data centers, going down to the client, depending on where they're coming from and so forth. So those are some of the bumps that we have to be ready to address and be ready to handle going forward. Okay, so what is Centrinet doing for our customers today? Since we are one of the initial partners, let me just change slide here. Since we have, as mentioned, one of those initial partners of Liquidware, we had the benefit and the ability to have access to their tool sets. And we were one of the first partners, to have that direct access into their Stratosphere Fit tool that gave us the ability to have that visibility into the discovery of the physical world before moving into the virtual world. But more importantly, now we've made leaps and bounds, and Liquidware has helped us to, and as partner with us, to help us be successful in our business by allowing us to be one of those managed services partners as part of their product offering. And what does that mean? That means that today a customer can call us and they may not know, maybe they didn't do the initial discovery when they went into the virtual world. Maybe they're having issues today and they just don't know how to go about addressing it. Through our partner program with Liquidware and our close relationship, we're able to go into those customers today, utilize the tools, figure out and give those customers that value add that, that is giving them those pain points and giving them that poor user experience. So we do this for our customers on a day-to-day basis. We provide them with health checks that are important for that monthly basis to the business. Again, always falling within the lines of the service level agreement. Customers that already have Liquidware Labs within their business, they're running these reports. They need a third opinion or a second opinion on how do they decipher the information that they're pulling on a frequently basis, and they aren't sure where the problems may lie. And then the fourth point of what we do to our customers is the quarterly reviews. We will sit with our customers, review 3 months of data, whatever the time period is for that quarterly business review, tell them what they're having problems with today, but more importantly, understand where the business is going, match it to the reports that we're seeing, and provide them with what I consider to be a roadmap for tomorrow. This is what Centrinet does today, and this is what makes up our offering. Thank you very much. I turn this back over to Kevin now at this point.
Dario, thanks so much. And I see some questions coming in. That's great. We've just got a couple more slides here to present, and then we'd love to take some time to address some of your questions. So let me frame this a bit for you and just give you a high-level overview of the product that Dario had mentioned, Stratosphere Solutions. Stratosphere is comprised of two elements, Stratosphere Fit and Stratosphere UX. As Dario mentioned, Stratosphere Fit is really our enablement platform. We make this available through our partnerships and through folks like Centrinet to really enable and put them in a great position to be able to support end users directly. specifically Stratosphere Fit, is a tool meant to assess, quantify, and really baseline your user experience. As I said, it's looking at, and as Dario explained, it's looking at all kinds of information in your environment to help you to not just define the platform or the bill of materials, but also identify the architecture, the delivery approach, which applications, which kinds of resources are going to be required based on specific users and specific groups of users and their needs. And ultimately, and in my opinion, the most important thing, baseline user experience. Be able to define normal as it relates to what your users are experiencing, what types of performance, what types of applications, and quantify that number, quantify that user experience specifically in a way that's going to help you to use it as a measurement to define success. With Stratosphere Fit, it's going to certainly help you to save time going through this process, ensuring that you put yourself in the best position possible to recognize strong returns and to recognize all of the operational efficiencies that are promised. But it's also going to help you to save some money. It's going to help to make sure that you find your Goldilocks spot. You don't build an infrastructure that's too big. You don't build an infrastructure that's too small. You build one that's just right, based on your needs today and what your business may be requiring of you in the future. Stratosphere UX is now your ongoing platform for user experience monitoring. It is not just the proactive tool to trend and identify the metrics that are going to be most important to stay on top of user experience, but it's also your diagnostic solution to be able to delve deep into the infrastructure and into the components that are contributing to that user experience from a user-centric point of view. As we talked about earlier, that's really a critical differentiator when you're looking at monitoring solutions to determine what is really affecting that end user experience and ensuring that you don't leave yourself with any blind spots, false sense of security, or any type of needle in the haystack events as we talked about earlier. With Stratosphere UX, again, it's about saving time, it's about mitigating risk, and ensuring that you never leave your users without the platform and without the workspace that they've depended on. I often will say when you get the individual image wrong for a user or two, it's a relatively minor exercise. You can go back and re-ghost or re-image those laptops, and you've really only inconvenienced a very small subset of your user base. When you get a gold image wrong, or when you have an entire virtual desktop infrastructure that goes down, you've got a career-limiting move on your hands if you're not able to quickly remediate, quickly define what is the root cause of that issue and get that environment up and running quickly. So think about it not just from a saving time standpoint, but from a mitigation of risk standpoint. And of course, it all translates to money at the end of the day. To ensure that your platform is meeting the needs of your current and any future growth opportunities, as well as being able to minimize outages and downtime and keeping your users productive, all of these things ultimately are going to contribute to your return on investment and your total cost of ownership. With that, I want to thank you all for joining us here in this session, and I think I'll turn things back over to Ray so that we might address any questions that you might have.
Thanks, guys. We do have a few questions coming in here. So one of the first ones I see coming in here, it says, can one of you please speak to graphics usage metrics in more detail for VDI? Specifically, what is available today and what is coming soon?
Dario, why don't I take that one?
Okay.
So today, Stratosphere can look at GDI objects, and while that is a secondary metric, it's certainly an application or user-centric metric as it relates to the graphics intensity and what a user is experiencing as it relates to their applications. The challenge in graphics and moving forward, and we've got some really exciting things that we're going to be able to share and talk about shortly within the Stratosphere platform. The nirvana here is really being able to look at not just GPU stats as it relates to graphics and general purpose graphics on your platforms, but being able to look within the applications themselves and being able to identify specifically those graphical calls that are being made by the applications and translate those kinds of metrics and translate that information into something that's very actionable. Simply measuring megahertz of a GPU or virtual video RAM of a GPU is not going to translate into something that's actionable. What you're seeing today in the market is a collection of more metrics, and certainly we're planning to add some of those metrics as well. But as it relates specifically to actionable information to help you determine what's going to put you in the best place to maximize your user experience, you're going to see some very exciting things coming out from Liquidware Labs here in relatively short order.
Okay, I think I've got another question here, probably for Dario. Can you give us a real-world example in which UX provided insight to assisting your engineering team on root cause?
Sure. There's a number of incidents and cases in which our team has been called into a client site due to lack of visibility into or issues that they're currently experiencing. But you know, to the point of the graphics intensity applications that exist out there, we several months ago we received a report, and a client requested that we come on site because they were experiencing, a subset of users were experiencing issues as it pertains to their experiences within the virtual desktop session and so forth, and they were unable to really pinpoint exactly what was causing those subset of users to have this problem. Well, we went in and we loaded Stratosphere UX into their environment, and then after capturing a 14 to 30-day window of metrics, we realized that they were running this one particular application, that subset of department, that was a very graphic-intensive application. And that graphic, once that image or that information was loaded as part of the application, it actually consumed the resources from the virtual desktop session. So basically what we had is, and what we concluded is that we needed, and we provided a subset of recommendations to ensure that the clients and those subset of users either needed to offload that GPU into another form of outside of the typical VDI standards of what we built as the resource, or increase the resources accordingly. But we needed to get into that visibility, and we utilized the Stratosphere UX to give us that information accordingly as necessary.
All right, great. Here's another question. How do you define and quantify the user experience with Stratosphere UX? Kevin, I think that one's probably more up your alley.
Yeah, really good question, and I think it gets to the heart of why we're different than others. A lot of folks talk about user experience and how they increase user experience or how they benefit user experience. At the heart of Stratosphere UX, the UX, by the way, stands for user experience, is what we call a composite metrics, or our VDI UX profile. And the VDI UX profile is something that is platform agnostic. We have that profile or that measurement on physical devices, on virtual devices, and we use that to be able to trend, baseline, and ultimately compare or validate user experience throughout the journey or life cycle of your transformation. We've, through many years and many transformed desktops, I think in the 6 years that Liquidware has been in existence, we've transformed just over 6 million desktops. So we're talking about a very large sample size in terms of data set. We have found that user experiences really needs to be comprised of a hybrid approach of different metrics, both machine experience indicators as well as I/O experience indicators. So on a machine experience indicator, it's things like login delay, application load time, memory usage, page file usage, page faults, non-responding applications, those kinds of metrics. And from an I/O experience indicator standpoint, it's things like disk load, disk queue length, network latency, any failed network connections. And overall, these are together representative of a composite metric that we allow you to weight and define a good, fair, and poor rating by user, by group, by application, by all kinds of different metrics. But at the end of the day, it's our ability to quantify and allow you to trend over time the user experience.
All right. Great. I think to kind of add on to that a little bit, Brad says he's brand new to Liquidware, so welcome aboard, Brad. But he asks, do your solutions support both physical and virtual platforms? And specifically, he's asking about what about application monitoring for AX400 apps?
Wow. So good question. So we are, as I said, we're agnostic with Stratosphere. Stratosphere looks at user experience whenever you're using a virtual workload, and these are predominantly Windows-centric workloads. So when you're looking at an application, and specifically an application delivered by a mid-tier system like an AX400 or you know, a Unix-based mid-tier system, you're probably looking more at an APM, a traditional application performance monitoring solution, rather than a desktop application performance monitoring solution. In other words, if you're talking about an ERP or a back-end database or a customer relationship management type of database that's comprised of a web front end and a database back end and possibly some middleware and those kinds of environments, that's really where an application performance monitoring or an APM solution is going to shine. Stratosphere UX, and when we talk about user experience and I talk about applications, I'm really talking about desktop applications. I'm talking about things like Word and Excel and Outlook and those things that are traditionally workloads that are run on the desktop itself. So not exactly apples to apples, maybe apples to oranges. So I hope that addresses the question in terms of how we support mid-tier or more infrastructure-centric application performance.
Okay. Here's one for Dario. We are located in Wisconsin. Can Centrinet help me with my deployment and monitoring?
Well, thank you. Good question. And the short answer to that is yes. Since our client base have global presence, we have clients in which we provide support, managed services for, and we've actually built environments across EMEA, Singapore, all over parts of the U.S. That is not a problem. I mean, we're moving and living in a cloud-based world where most people are working from anywhere anyway, so that is not an issue whatsoever.
Great. Kevin, here's another one for you. We would like to be able to look at inventory of applications over time, not just during an assessment. Is that something that Stratosphere can help with?
Absolutely. So, you know, inventory and looking at your applications in the initial periods, like during an assessment, is certainly part of a sound approach when you're building an image strategy or a gold image strategy or an application strategy overall. But we have many, many customers who are constantly looking to evolve and optimize their desktop application delivery approach. And so Stratosphere Fit, which is the assessment solution or tool that we recommend for more inventory or that kind of measurement or monitoring, is actually a component or a subset of Stratosphere UX. And so when you purchase Stratosphere UX, you're also getting all of the inventory and information and tool set to be able to perform things like ongoing inventories or perform exercises that are going to support things like a continuous optimization of your application strategy or your image strategy.
Okay, great. All right. With that, there's a lot of great information here. I want to take a minute here and remind everyone that they should go ahead and feel free to check out our partner solution brief. I'll put a link to that into the chat window. so that you can go ahead and download that. It's something that Centrinet and Liquidware Labs has worked on over time and has a lot of great information on the topic as well. Also, we encourage you to go ahead and to visit our websites. Go ahead and email us and or tweet us. It's a great way to ask some questions and get some answers to some of your things and create a dialogue and see how we can help you out there. So without much more ado, unless Kevin and Dario have any last things, I want to thank them for their time and for coming on and presenting with us, and we can go ahead and wrap up today.
I just want to thank you, Ray, and thank all of you for joining us, and certainly a big thank you to Centrinet for being a great Liquidware partner.
Thank you all as well from Centrinet's behalf.
All right, thank you, everyone, and be sure to remember to watch your inboxes for a copy to the links for some of the different things that we talked about, some more information from us, and also a link to the recording from today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye.